Hey there, pull up a chair. Let me tell you about the last Thanksgiving I ever spent at the Laurent family estate. The air in that grand dining room was thick with the scent of roasted turkey and unspoken resentments. My father-in-law, Arthur, raised his crystal glass, the wine inside, my wine. The one that won all the awards and saved his crumbling legacy, swirling like blood. He wasn't looking at me, his daughter-in-law. He was smiling at the perfectly polished woman sitting in my seat. A woman who saw our vineyard not as a home, but as a plot of land on a blueprint. To the future, Arthur toasted, his eyes glittering with a cold fire. And to making the difficult decisions necessary for progress. My husband, Liam, the man who once promised to build a life with me amongst these very vines, wouldn't meet my gaze. He just stared at his plate as if it held the answers to the universe. They thought they had me cornered. The quiet, gentle botanist, the outsider who didn't understand their world of old money and older secrets. They thought I would break. Mon Dieu, how little they knew. What they forgot is that the deepest roots are the ones that grow in silence. And I had been tending mine for a very, very long time. Gun choyen ve vi tuan truoc du. Mo buoy sang moi tu say lan o von no Laurent Valley. Suong mu jiang mong tren nung luong no da duoc tu hoj. La ke mang mao vang va du ruk ro. The air that October morning had a particular crispness to it, the kind that promises a harsh winter. I could smell it, a mix of damp earth, decaying leaves, and the faint, sweet ghost of last month's harvest. This was my favorite time of day, just after dawn, when the valley was mine alone. My boots sank slightly into the rich soil as I walked the rows, my fingers gently brushing against the gnarled bark of a 50-year-old Riesling vine. This was my sanctuary, my work. 3 years ago, when I first came here with Liam, this place was dying. A nasty case of phylloxera was choking the life out of the original rootstock. And the finances, well, the finances were a mess. Arthur, a man who wore his family legacy like a heavy crown, saw my master's degree in viticulture as a cute hobby. He'd pat my hand and say, "The Laurent way has worked for 100 years. My dear, the Laurent way was bankrupting them. It was my way, grafting new, resistant rootstock, introducing organic pest control, converting half the acreage to high-yield cool climate varietals, that saved them." My Isabel's Blush, a rosé I named after Liam's estranged sister, won gold at the Finger Lakes International Wine Competition. That award brought the distributors, the articles in wine magazines, the tourists. It brought the money that kept the grand, drafty manor house from falling into ruin. A heavy footstep behind me broke the morning's peace. It was Arthur. He didn't need to say a word. His presence alone felt like a judgment. He was holding a cup of coffee in a delicate porcelain cup, completely out of place amongst the dirt and vines. The yield from Block C was adequate this year, he said. It wasn't a compliment. With Arthur, nothing ever was. It was a careful measurement of my worth. It was our best yield on record. Arthur, I replied, my tone even. I refused to let him see he got under my skin. I kept my hands busy, pruning a stray shoot from a vine. The new trellising system is working. Perhaps, he mused, taking a delicate sip. My grandfather preferred the old way. He believed you had to let the vines struggle. He said it builds character in the grapes. The subtext was clear. You make things too easy. You are not one of us. You don't understand. Liam appeared then, jogging towards us from the house. His face flushed. He always looked like a boy trying to please a father who was impossible to please. Morning, Dad. Elara. Great day. He kissed my cheek, but it was a fleeting, nervous gesture. His eyes were already on his father. I was just telling Elara about your great-grandfather's philosophy, Arthur said, his gaze fixed on me. Right, the struggling vines. Liam chuckled, a hollow sound. Dad, we've been over this. Elara's methods work. The numbers don't lie. Numbers are for accountants. Liam, legacy is for family, Arthur said, turning to walk back towards the house. Don't forget we have the quarterly review this afternoon. I've asked our lawyer to sit in. Just a formality. My stomach tightened into a cold knot. A lawyer? For a quarterly review? Liam must have seen the look on my face. It's nothing, Ellie, honestly, he whispered as soon as Arthur was out of earshot. You know how he is. He just likes to feel in control. It's the Laurent way. He squeezed my hand, but his palm was clammy. I looked at our intertwined fingers, then back at the sprawling manor house. It stood against the gray sky, beautiful and imposing, but I could see the cracks in the facade, the paint peeling near the window frames, the slight sag in the roofline of the west wing. It was a house, and a family, that looked perfect from a distance. But up close, you could see it was slowly, surely, falling apart, and I was starting to realize I was the only one trying to hold it together, while the ones who called it home were busy deciding how to tear it all down. That quarterly review wasn't a formality. It was an ambush. I knew it the moment I walked into Arthur's study. He called it his study, though it was I who had organized the accounts, built the projections, and negotiated the deals with distributors that kept this room, and this entire house, from being repossessed. Liam was trying to project an air of calm, but he kept running a hand through his hair, a nervous tic he'd had since he was a boy. He was a terrible liar. As you can see, I began, my voice sounding too loud in the oppressive silence. Our sales for the last quarter are up 15%. The Isabel's Blush continues to outperform expectations, and the new Chardonnay is getting excellent reviews. If we stay on this trajectory. Thank you, Elara. A commendable effort. Arthur cut me off, his words smooth but dismissive. He exchanged a look with the lawyer. But we're here today to discuss a different kind of trajectory. A more realistic one. My hands grew cold. I glanced at Liam, but he was suddenly fascinated by a spot on the Persian rug. He was in on it. Whatever this was, he knew. The knot in my stomach, the one that had been there all morning, tightened into a fist of ice. Right on cue, we heard the crunch of tires on the gravel driveway. A sleek, black Tesla, silent and predatory, pulled up in front of the house. It looked like a spaceship that had landed in a forgotten century. A woman emerged, all sharp angles and expensive tailoring. She wore a cream-colored pantsuit that probably cost more than our first Great Press. Ah, that must be our 930, Arthur said, a flicker of something. Was it excitement in his eyes? Liam finally looked up, his expression a miserable mix of guilt and apprehension. Her name was Chloe Vance. She walked into the study and the room seemed to shrink around her. Her perfume was sharp and citrusy, a stark contrast to the room's musty scent. She shook Arthur's hand firmly, gave the lawyer a curt nod, and then turned her bright, intelligent eyes on me. You must be Elara, she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. I've heard so much about you. You've done wonders with the terroir here. Truly. She sat down, crossing her legs, and placed a slim leather portfolio on the desk. The sound it made was a soft, expensive thud. I'll get straight to the point. Gentlemen, she said, pointedly ignoring me now. My firm, Vantage Point Developments, is prepared to make a significant, all-cash offer for this property. All 200 acres. She slid a document out of the portfolio. Davies, the lawyer, leaned in to look at it, his boredom instantly vanishing. His eyebrows shot up. The offer, Chloe continued, her voice like smooth steel, is for $8 million. Silence. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. Each tick marking a second of my world tilting on its axis. 8 million. It was a number so large, so ludicrous. It felt like a fantasy. It was enough to erase every debt, repair every crumbling wall, and live a life of leisure for decades. It was a king's ransom. And it was the price for my soul. I watched Arthur's face. The mask of the proud patriarch slipped for just a moment, revealing the raw, naked greed beneath. His knuckles were white where he gripped the arms of his chair. Liam just stared, his mouth slightly agape, looking like a stunned fish. We would, of course, need to clear the acreage. Chloe went on, her tone casual, as if she were discussing redecorating. Our plans include a luxury spa, an 18-hole golf course, and exclusive residential plots. The Laurent Valley Golf and Racquet Club has a nice ring to it. Don't you think? That was it, the coup de grace. She wasn't just talking about buying the land, she was talking about eradicating it. plowing under the Riesling vines my husband's great-grandfather had planted with his own hands. Bulldozing the soil I had spent 3 years painstakingly nurturing back to health. "No," I said. The word was quiet, but it cut through the room like a shard of glass. 4 pairs of eyes turned to me. "Excuse me?" Arthur said, his voice dangerously low. "This land isn't for sale," I repeated, looking directly at Chloe. I stood up, my own folder of projections feeling flimsy and pointless in my hands. "This is a vineyard. It's a legacy. It's our home. It is not, and will never be, a golf course." Chloe gave a little laugh. A condescending puff of air. "Elara, I understand your sentimental attachment. It's charming, but business is not about sentiment. This isn't just business," I shot back, my voice gaining strength. "It's our life. It's my life's work." "Elara, that's enough," Arthur snapped, his face flushing with anger. "You are being emotional. Chloe is presenting us with a lifeline. A chance to secure this family's future. Free from debt and struggle. Struggle is what gives the wine character. Isn't that what you said?" I challenged him, my heart pounding. "Or does that philosophy only apply when it's my labor? And not your bank account?" His eyes narrowed into slits. The battle lines were drawn. I turned to Liam, my last hope. "Liam, tell them this is our dream." Liam looked from his father's furious face to my pleading one. He opened his mouth, and for a second, I thought he would stand with me. It's a lot to consider. "Ellie," he stammered, his gaze falling back to the floor. "It's $8 million. We can't just dismiss it." He didn't defend me. He didn't defend us. Kel horror. In that moment, watching him crumble under his father's glare, I felt a profound and terrible sense of clarity. I was utterly alone in this fight. Chloe Vance stood up, gathering her things with an air of finality. She knew she had already won the most important man in the room. "I'll leave the offer with you," she said smoothly, handing the portfolio to Arthur. "My direct line is on the card. I look forward to hearing from you." She walked out without a backward glance. I stood frozen, watching through the tall window as her Tesla purred down the driveway. Its tires leaving 2 perfect, dark lines in the gravel. A scar on my home. When the car was gone, I turned back to the room. Liam was still staring at the floor, the picture of shame, but Arthur was looking at me. And in his eyes, I saw no longer just condescension or disapproval. I saw a declaration of war. The silence that fell after Chloe Vance left was heavier and more suffocating than any argument could ever be. We sat for dinner that night in the cavernous dining room. 3 people marooned at a vast ocean of polished mahogany. Arthur, smelling of victory and expensive scotch, acted as if it were just another Tuesday. He'd occasionally make a comment about the weather or the stock market. And Liam would grunt a one-word reply. They didn't mention the $8 million elephant in the room. That's the first step in gaslighting. Pretend the crazy thing never happened. Make the other person feel like they're the only one who remembers the explosion. In the days that followed, the vineyard, once my sanctuary, began to feel like enemy territory. The whispers started, not real whispers, but the feeling of them. Doors would quietly close as I approached. Liam would end a phone call abruptly if I entered the room. It was 1,000 tiny cuts, each one designed to make me feel like a stranger in my own home. The first concrete piece of evidence came during a routine invoice review. My eyes scanned the spreadsheets I knew by heart, but one line item jumped out. A $50,000 payment to a Vantage Point Consulting. The name was too close to Chloe's firm to be a coincidence. I walked down to the small office where our bookkeeper, a woman who had been with the family for 30 years, was working. "Helen, do you have the invoice for this Vantage Point payment?" I asked, keeping my voice casual. She wouldn't meet my eyes. She fussed with a stack of papers on her desk. "Oh, that," she mumbled. "Mr. Arthur handled that one directly. Said it was for strategic development." Strategic development, I repeated. The phrase was so vague it was meaningless. "I handle the development strategy. Why wasn't I consulted?" "You'd have to ask Mr. Arthur," she said, finally looking at me with an expression of pity. It was worse than hostility. It made me feel small. Then came the barrels. My new Chardonnay. The one I was banking on to win us another award next season. Required aging in specific, medium toast French oak barrels. I had ordered them months ago. They were due to arrive on Friday. When the truck never showed up, I called the supplier. "Oh, Mrs. Laurent," the man on the phone said, a note of confusion in his voice. "We received a cancellation email for that order last week. From your husband's account." My blood ran cold. I found Liam down by the fermenting tanks. His shoulders hunched. When I confronted him, he feigned surprise, but it was a clumsy, unconvincing performance. "Cancelled? No, that can't be right," he said, pulling out his phone. "It must have been a mistake. A mix-up in accounting. I'll sort it out. Ellie, don't worry." "Don't worry?" My voice trembled, a mixture of anger and hurt. "Liam, those barrels are crucial. We could lose the entire vintage. This isn't just a mix-up. Someone is actively sabotaging my work." "Sabotaging? Say ridicule," he scoffed, but his eyes darted away. "You're being dramatic. You're under a lot of stress. That's all. You're seeing conspiracies where there are just simple mistakes." That night, I decided I couldn't let it go. I gathered my notes, a copy of the Vantage Point consulting payment, the email from the barrel supplier. I waited until we were in the privacy of our bedroom, the one place that was supposed to be ours. The wind was howling outside, rattling the old window frames, a perfect soundtrack to the storm brewing inside me. "We need to talk," I said, my voice quiet but firm. Liam was unbuttoning his shirt, his back to me. "I'm tired, Ellie. It's been a long day." "I don't care," I said, stepping in front of him. I held up the papers. $50,000 to a consulting firm with the same name as the woman trying to buy our home. "My barrel order cancelled from your email account. Don't you dare tell me I'm being dramatic." He stared at the papers, then at me, and his expression hardened. The guilt was gone, replaced by a defensive anger. "I told you, the barrels were a mistake. And the consulting fee was Dad's idea. He's getting a market valuation. That's all. It's the responsible thing to do." "Responsible? Or is it due diligence before you sell my life's work out from under me?" "Your life's work?" He laughed, a bitter, ugly sound. "This is my family's legacy. My name is on the gate. You've been here for 3 years. You don't get to decide everything. I'm the reason there's still a legacy. The reason that name on the gate isn't a foreclosure notice." "You're hysterical," he spat, his voice rising. "You're completely paranoid. This is exactly what Dad was talking about. You get so emotional. You can't think straight. You can't see that we're just trying to secure our future." The bedroom door creaked open. Arthur stood there, wearing a silk dressing gown, a look of grave concern on his face. He had been listening. Of course, he had. "Is everything all right in here?" he asked, his tone oozing false sincerity. I heard shouting. "It's nothing, Dad," Liam said, running a hand through his hair. "Elara's just upset." Arthur walked into the room, placing a comforting hand on Liam's shoulder, creating a united front against me. He looked at me with the kind of gentle condescension a doctor reserves for a particularly delusional patient. "Elara, my dear," he said softly, "perhaps you've been working too hard. This business, it can be stressful. Maybe you should take a break. A little trip away. Let Liam and I handle the boring administrative side of things for a while. For your own health." I stared at the two of them, the father and the son, standing together, their faces a mirror of feigned concern. They weren't just disagreeing with me. They were trying to erase my reality. They were telling me my instincts were lies. My evidence was a fantasy. My sanity was failing. Incroyable. I backed away slowly, the papers slipping from my numb fingers and scattering on the floor. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just looked at the man I had married, and the man whose family I had saved. And I saw them for what they were. I was not hysterical. I was not paranoid. I was in danger. And as I turned and walked out of my own bedroom, leaving them standing there amidst the ruins of our marriage, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I had to fight back. And I had to do it all by myself. For a full day after they tried to label me as crazy, I felt like a ghost in my own house. I'd walk through the grand rooms, and Arthur would look right through me. Liam would leave a room the moment I entered it. They were freezing me out, waiting for me to break, to pack a bag and run. But where would I go? Every cent I had, Every ounce of sweat and knowledge was tied up in the soil of this valley. Leaving felt like cutting out my own heart. So, I retreated to the one place I knew they would never go, the past. I spent hours in the dusty attic, sifting through forgotten history, tucked away in a heavy leather-bound photo album. I found her, Isabelle Laurent. In every photo, she was the splash of wild color in a sea of beige. A rebellious teenager with ink-black hair and a defiant smirk, standing next to a stiff, disapproving Arthur. There were stories, of course, whispered by the older staff. The daughter who had a scandalous affair with a harvest worker. The artist who refused to go to business school. The one who told Arthur to his face what he was and was disowned for it. She was the family's great shame. To me, she sounded like my only hope. It took me another day of quiet, frantic searching on my laptop in the dead of night to find her. No social media, no public profile, just a small, obscure blog post about an art collective in Ithaca, with a blurry photo of a painter whose fiery eyes I recognized instantly. Isabelle L., it said. It was a long shot, but it was the only shot I had. Her studio was in a converted warehouse down by the railroad tracks. A world away from the manicured lawns of Laurent Valley. The air smelled of turpentine and freshly brewed coffee. The space was a chaotic explosion of life. Canvases leaned against every wall. Some vast and abstract, others stark, angry portraits. It was messy and vibrant and wonderful. Isabelle was standing in the middle of it all, wearing paint-splattered overalls, her dark hair now streaked with gray and tied back in a messy bun. She was older, but the defiant fire in her eyes was unchanged. She looked me up and down, taking in my simple country clothes and the desperation I was trying so hard to hide. "Let me guess," she said, her voice raspy, not unkindly. "You're the new wife, the botanist. Let me give you the family tour. My father is a tyrant. My brother is a coward. And the whole damn place is built on a foundation of lies. Anything else I can help you with?" Her directness was like a splash of cold water. My name is Elara. I know who you are," she said, turning back to her canvas. "I read the wine magazines." Isabelle's blush, cute, a bit on the nose. "Don't you think? I named it that because I heard you were the one who originally tried to plant those Pinot Noir grapes. Before your father tore them out," I said softly. She froze, her paintbrush hovering in midair. She turned to face me again, her expression shifting from cynical amusement to cautious curiosity. "He told you that?" "No," I said. "The head groundskeeper told me. He said you had a gift for the land. But that Arthur is a monster who destroys anything he can't control." She finished for me, her voice laced with an old, familiar bitterness. "So, what do you want, Elara? Money? Revenge? An escape route?" "I want to save the vineyard," I said, my voice finally finding its strength. And then I told her everything. The $8 million offer. Chloe Vance. The gaslighting. The cancelled barrels. The $50,000 consulting fee. I laid out the whole ugly story, piece by piece. She listened without interrupting, her sharp eyes studying my face, searching for any hint of deception. When I was finished, a long silence hung between us, punctuated only by the distant rumble of a passing train. "So, the viper is finally eating its own tail," she said, a grim smile touching her lips. "He did it to you, just like he did to Uncle Thomas." "Uncle Thomas?" I asked. "Arthur's brother?" "My father's younger brother," she said, her voice dropping. She walked over to a worn armchair and sank into it. "Thomas was the real genius. You know, he was the one with the gift. The one who understood the terroir. The vineyard was supposed to be split between them when my grandfather died. But Thomas was a dreamer. An artist, like me. Arthur was. Arthur." She took a deep breath. "There was a riding accident. Thomas was badly injured. While he was recovering, Arthur and his lawyers went to work. They produced documents, expert, medical opinions, saying Thomas was mentally unfit, that the accident had left him unstable. They painted him as a fragile artist who couldn't handle the family business. They forced him to sign away his half for pennies on the dollar. They stole his birthright. Elara, my father stole his own brother's life and left him to die broke and broken-hearted a few years later." The story hit me like a physical blow. A pattern. A blueprint for my own destruction. I wasn't going crazy. I was just the latest victim in Arthur Laurent's long and sordid history of cruelty. "I'm so sorry, Isabel," I whispered. "Don't be sorry," she said, her eyes flashing with a sudden, fierce energy. "Get even." She stood up and walked to an old, paint-splattered trunk in the corner of the studio. She unlocked it and pulled out a small, velvet pouch. Thomas knew his brother. He suspected Arthur might try something. "Even before the accident," she said, her voice low and urgent. "He told me he hid something. Something to protect the vineyard's soul. He called it. He gave me this, and told me to give it to the person who loved the land as much as he did. When the time was right." She opened the pouch and tipped its contents into my palm. It wasn't a document. It wasn't a weapon. It was a key, old and heavy, made of black iron, with an ornate, fleur-de-lis pattern at its head. "What does it open?" I asked, my heart pounding. "I have no idea," Isabel confessed, "but he called it the key to the truth. And if you're going to fight my father, you're going to need all the truth you can get." She closed my fingers around the cool metal. "He's not just fighting you for money, Elara. He's fighting to bury the past. Go find what he's so afraid of." I returned to the vineyard with a ghost in my pocket. The iron key felt both cold and hot in my hand. A heavy secret I had to keep from the two men sleeping upstairs. That night, I waited until the old house settled into its deep, quiet breathing, the time just before dawn when the ghosts of the past feel closest. My hunt began. Where do you hide a family's soul? Not the study. That was Arthur's throne room. Every inch of it polished and controlled. Not the attic. That was a place for things you wanted to forget. Not protect. My instincts pulled me downwards. To the heart of it all. Liqueur of the vineyard. The wine cellar. The air grew cooler as I descended the old stone steps. The smell of damp earth and fermenting ghosts rising to meet me. This was the oldest part of the house. The foundation upon which everything else was built. I ran my hand along the cool, rough stone walls, past racks of my own award-winning wines, past Arthur's collection of dusty, overpriced Bordeaux, and into the back, to a section the family rarely entered, where the forgotten vintages lay sleeping. Behind a rickety rack of what looked like worthless, unlabeled bottles, I saw it. A single stone in the wall was slightly discolored. The mortar around it newer than the rest. My heart hammered against my ribs. Using the tip of a corkscrew, I carefully chipped away at the mortar until the stone was loose. I pulled it out, and there, in the darkness behind it, was not a chest, but the small, iron door of a wall safe. Rusted with age, in its center was a keyhole, ornate and black, a perfect match. With a deep breath, I slid the key in. It resisted, then turned with a low, grating groan that seemed to echo through the entire cellar. The heavy door swung open. Inside was a tin box, wrapped in oilcloth. My hands trembled as I lifted it out and carried it to a small tasting table. My phone's flashlight casting a single, dramatic beam of light on my discovery. Inside were two things: a thick stack of yellowed papers, tied with a faded blue ribbon, and a single, sealed envelope. I carefully untied the ribbon. The first document was the original deed to the Laurent Valley property, dated 1895. The second made my breath catch in my throat. It was the last will and testament of Thomas Laurent Sr., Arthur's father, dated 1983. I picked up the sealed envelope. On the front, in elegant, faded cursive, were the words, "For my sons." I slid it open. It was a letter. As my eyes scanned the first few lines, the cold, dark cellar around me seemed to melt away. The scene dissolves into a flashback. It is a bright, sunny afternoon. 40 years earlier, the vineyard is vibrant. A handsome, silver-haired man, Thomas Laurent Sr., walks through the vines, followed by his two sons, a young, sharply dressed Arthur, and a younger, gentler Thomas Jr., his hands stained with dirt. "Look," the grandfather's voice says, warm and resonant, narrating his own letter. Arthur sees the rows, the yields, the numbers on a ledger. He sees a business. But you, Thomas, you see the life. You see the struggle and the triumph in each vine. In the memory, Thomas Jr. is tending to a vine, his touch gentle, while Arthur stands back, impatiently checking his watch. A man cannot own this land. The grandfather continues in voiceover. As we see him talking to both his sons. We are merely its caretakers. It will be here long after our names have turned to dust. The name, Laurent, on the gate means nothing if the soul of the land is dead. The flashback shifts. The grandfather is in his study with his lawyer. He looks older, more frail, but his eyes are clear and determined. So I am adding a clause to my will. His voice narrates. A failsafe. To protect the vineyard from ambition without heart. My sons will inherit it jointly. But the land itself is bound by a covenant. It can never be sold for any purpose other than the cultivation of grapes and the production of wine. The grandfather leans forward, emphasizing his next words to the lawyer. Furthermore, should the partners come to a disagreement, full operational control shall be given to the caretaker, by blood or by marriage, who has demonstrated the most profound and successful commitment to preserving the health and legacy of the terroir itself. Let it be a legacy of passion, not just a legacy of name. The scene dissolves back to the present. Elara is in the cellar, tears streaming down her face. She is holding the letter in one hand and the will in the other. She now sees the full picture. The grandfather knew his son, Arthur. He knew his ambition and his greed. And he had forged a weapon to stop him. A weapon that had lain dormant for 40 years. Thomas Jr., the gifted son, was cheated out of his inheritance before he ever had a chance to use this. But the old man had been wise enough to add 5 crucial words, by blood or by marriage. He wasn't just protecting the land from Arthur. He was protecting it for someone like me. I gently placed the documents back in the box. My tears were gone, replaced by a cold, clear certainty. This was never just a fight for a company or a home. It was a fight for a ghost's last wish. For the soul of the land. Arthur and Liam thought their ambush was set for Thanksgiving dinner. They had no idea I was about to walk into that dining room armed with their own family history. Ready to uphold the only legacy that ever truly mattered. Every Thanksgiving, Arthur had a tradition. He'd stand at the head of the table and give a speech about the 3 F's, family, faith, and fortune. It was always a masterful performance. La comedy of a benevolent patriarch. But this year, I knew a 4th F was on the menu. Falsehood. I walked into that dining room knowing it was a stage. And I was the lead in a tragedy they had written for me. My role was simple. I was the lamb to be slaughtered. Liam was already 3 glasses of wine in before the turkey was even carved. He couldn't look at me. He busied himself with refilling glasses and laughing too loudly at Arthur's stale jokes. He was radiating guilt like heat off asphalt. He was the court jester, trying to distract everyone from the impending execution. And then, just as the guests were settling, the doorbell rang. Arthur stood, dabbing his lips with a napkin. A smug, theatrical smile on his face. Ah, our final guest. I took the liberty of inviting a dear friend and trusted advisor to join us. I believe you've all met the brilliant Chloe Vance. Chloe swept in, dressed in a sharp, minimalist black dress that made her look like a panther stalking into a chicken coop. She carried a bottle of champagne, not ours, I noted, but an expensive French brand. A subtle insult. She greeted Liam with a familiar kiss on the cheek and smiled at me. A wolfish, triumphant glint in her eyes. The ambush wasn't just planned, it was being flaunted. They didn't just want to win, they wanted to humiliate me. I smiled back, a calm, serene smile that I knew would infuriate them. Chloe, what a surprise, I said, my voice as smooth as cream. Welcome to our home. Please, sit. The dinner was an exercise in tension. Every bite of food felt like chewing on glass. The conversation was a minefield of subtext and veiled insults. Arthur praised the turkey, then looked at me and added, "It's amazing what a little traditional seasoning can do for something. Isn't it?" Chloe complimented my wine. Isabel's blush, then turned to Arthur and said, "It has excellent potential. With the right investment, imagine what this brand could become." They were talking about my life's work as if it were already a chapter in a history book they were writing. I played my part. I was the perfect hostess. The dutiful wife. I smiled. I passed the gravy. I listened. I let them think they were in complete control. I watched Liam drink himself into a stupor. Watched Arthur preen like a king holding court. watched Chloe assess the room like a property she already owned. I let the silence between my words grow. Let my composure become my shield. I could feel their frustration mounting. My refusal to crumble was ruining their fun. Finally, after the plates were cleared for dessert, Arthur tapped his wine glass with a knife. The ringing sound cut through the low chatter, silencing the room. This was it, le coup de théâtre. He stood, holding his glass aloft. Family, he began, his voice resonating with false emotion. Today we give thanks. We give thanks for our heritage, for this beautiful home that has stood for over a century. And we give thanks for the courage to make difficult decisions to protect that heritage for the next century. He paused, letting his words hang in the air. His eyes settled on me. His expression shifted into one of grave, paternalistic concern. As many of you know, he continued, his voice dropping into a somber tone. The vineyard has faced challenges. And our dear Elara has shouldered so much of that burden. Perhaps, too much. I felt Liam shrink in his chair beside me. Chloe watched me with cold, clinical curiosity. Her passion is a gift. Arthur went on, but that passion has, recently, curdled into an emotional instability that has become a concern for us all. Gasps rippled around the table from the few distant cousins who had been invited. My hands lay still in my lap. I didn't flinch. She has been suffering from paranoia, making baseless accusations, and showing an inability to separate business realities from her feelings, he said, shaking his head with practiced sadness. It breaks my heart to say this, but we cannot allow her condition to jeopardize the future of this family and its legacy. He took a deep breath, preparing for the final blow. Therefore, after consulting with legal and medical professionals, and with Liam's full and heartbroken agreement, we have accepted Ms. Vance's generous offer to acquire the Laurent Valley estate. Furthermore, he looked directly at me now, his eyes like chips of ice. We will be petitioning the court to have Liam assume full, protective control of their shared assets, on the grounds that Elara is, at this time, emotionally and medically unfit to participate in such decisions. We are doing this to protect her, and to protect ourselves. He'd done it, he had, in front of everyone, declared me insane, a hysterical woman whose work, whose marriage, whose very reality was now forfeit. He had stripped me bare and left me for dead in the middle of his perfectly set Thanksgiving table. Liam finally looked at me, his eyes were swimming with tears and wine. Ellie, he whispered, the words catching in his throat. We're doing this for you. A profound, heavy silence descended upon the room. Everyone stared at me. They were waiting for the explosion. The tears, the screams, the satisfying, dramatic collapse of the woman they had just destroyed. I let the silence stretch, letting them all sit in the filth of what they had just done. I slowly picked up my water glass, my movements unhurried. I took a small, deliberate sip. I placed the glass back on the table, the soft clink echoing in the stillness. I looked at Liam's pathetic, crumbling face. I looked at Chloe's smug, triumphant one, and then I looked at Arthur, at the proud patriarch who believed he had just won. I gave him another small, serene smile. Well, I said, my voice quiet, but carrying to every corner of the room. Now that the formalities are out of the way, shall we begin? Arthur's laugh was a brittle, ugly thing. Begin? He chuckled, shaking his head as if dealing with a petulant child. My dear girl, it's already over. You are overwrought. Liam, perhaps you should take your wife upstairs so she can rest. I'm not going anywhere, I said, my voice still quiet, but now it held a resonance that made Liam flinch. And I'm not overwrought, I'm just getting started. As if on cue, a figure appeared in the grand archway of the dining room. The firelight cast a long shadow before her. It was Isabel. She stood there, wearing a simple black coat, her arms crossed, her eyes burning with an intensity that silenced the room anew. Arthur's face, which had been a mask of smug pity, turned ashen. Isabel, he breathed, the name a curse on his lips. What in God's name are you doing here? This is a private family dinner. It looks like a public execution to me, Isabel said, her voice cutting through the tension. And I've always believed the condemned deserves a witness. She walked towards me, her gaze never leaving her father's face. In her hand, she carried a worn leather satchel. She placed it on the table beside my plate. "Thank you for coming, Isabel," I said calmly. I opened the satchel and took out the old tin box. I placed it on the table with a soft, definitive thud. Arthur stared at the box. And for the first time that night, I saw a flicker of genuine, gut-wrenching fear in his eyes. He knew what it was. "Before we discuss my instability," I said, letting my gaze sweep across the stunned faces at the table, "I'd like to talk about legacy. You love that word, don't you, Arthur? The Laurent legacy." I paused. "Your father had a very specific idea of what that meant. He believed it was a legacy of passion, not just a legacy of name. Isn't that right? Or did you forget about that? The same way you forgot about your brother, Thomas?" A sharp, collective intake of breath came from the distant cousins. Arthur's face contorted, a mixture of rage and panic. "You have no right to speak that name in this house." "I have every right," I shot back, my voice rising with controlled power. "Because you tried to do to me exactly what you did to him." I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. I opened the tin box. La vérité éclate. The truth bursts forth. "You see, your father was a wise man. He saw the ambition in your heart, Arthur. He saw that it was a hunger without a soul. And he took steps to protect his life's work from it." I pulled out the yellowed, folded papers. First, the letter. My hands were perfectly steady. "This is a letter from Thomas Laurent Sr. to his sons." I began to read, my voice clear and strong, filling the suddenly silent room. "My dear Arthur, my dear Thomas, a man cannot own this land. We are merely its caretakers." Arthur sees the rows, the yields, the numbers on a ledger. He sees a business. "But you, Thomas, you see the life?" As I spoke the grandfather's words, it felt as if his ghost had entered the room. A silent, final judge. Arthur was on his feet now, his face purple with rage. "This is a farce, a forgery. That woman has poisoned you with lies." I ignored him, picking up the second document. "And this is his last will and testament. The one you thought you buried." I imagine. I unfolded it, the old paper crackling like fire. "I'd like to draw everyone's attention to a specific covenant. The Laurent Valley Covenant, dated 1983. It states, and I quote, 'This land, in perpetuity, can never be sold for any purpose other than the cultivation of grapes and the production of wine.'" Chloe Vance went rigid, her perfectly composed face finally cracked. Her eyes darted from the will in my hand to Arthur's panicked face. "What is she talking about, Arthur? A covenant? You assured me the title was clean." "She's lying," Arthur bellowed. "Am I?" I asked, my voice dropping again, cold and sharp. I continued reading. "And here is the most interesting part. Should the managing partners come to a disagreement regarding the disposition of the estate, full and indisputable operational control shall be given to the caretaker, by blood or by marriage, who has demonstrated the most profound and successful commitment to preserving the health and legacy of the terroir itself." I let the words hang in the air, a death sentence to his plans. Then, I reached into the satchel one last time and pulled out my own folder. I laid the papers on the table next to the will. "Here is my commitment, the financial reports showing a 15% growth since I took over. The press clippings for the wine that saved this family from bankruptcy. The gold medal certificate for the Isabel's blush." I looked at Arthur, then at Liam. "Where is yours?" The room erupted. Arthur was sputtering, calling me a thief, a charlatan. Liam had buried his face in his hands, his body shaking with silent, racking sobs. But Chloe Vance was a businesswoman. She understood liability. She stood up, her chair making a loud, scraping noise. Her face was a mask of cold fury, directed entirely at Arthur. "You're a fool, Arthur," she said, her voice dripping with contempt. "You brought me into this family mess based on a fraudulent premise. This deal is void. You'll be hearing from my legal team." She didn't even look at me as she turned and strode out of the dining room, her heels clicking like gunshots on the hardwood floor. Her exit was the final nail in Arthur's coffin. He had been abandoned, defeated. He sank back into his chair, a deflated, old man. The tyrant was gone, replaced by a pathetic fraud. I looked at my husband, at the man who had sat silently while his father tried to have me declared insane. Then I looked at the sister he had allowed to be cast out. "This dinner is over," I announced to the silent, staring guests. I walked to the head of the table, to Arthur's seat, and stood behind it. "Arthur," I said, my voice void of all emotion. "From this moment on, you are a guest in this house. And your visiting hours are over." I turned my gaze to Liam. "As for you, we will discuss your future later." I finally looked at Isabel, who was watching me with a look of fierce, tearful pride. "For now," I said, my voice softening for the first time, "I believe my husband has a long overdue apology to make to his sister." After the storm of that Thanksgiving, an incredible quiet descended upon the valley. The distant cousins and so-called family friends evaporated like morning mist. Arthur was gone the next day. He didn't say a word, just packed a single suitcase and had a car pick him up. I heard he's living in a condo in the city now. A king without a kingdom. The battle was over, but victory felt quiet. It felt like the stillness of this snow-covered vineyard, a clean slate. A chance to rest, but also a stark reminder of the emptiness that was left behind. La vie continue. Life goes on. Isabel stayed. She moved into the guest house. And her vibrant, chaotic energy began to breathe life back into the old manor's stuffy rooms. Her paintings now hang on the walls, splashes of defiant color against the dark wood. She is the laughter that now echoes in the hallways. Liam was the ghost. He moved into the old picker's cottage at the far end of the property. A self-imposed exile. For months, I barely saw him. I'd just catch glimpses of him through the flurries of snow, a solitary figure mending fences, clearing frozen irrigation lines, chopping wood. He was performing a silent, back-breaking penance. One afternoon, as the first signs of a thaw began to appear, I found him in the greenhouse, painstakingly cleaning and oiling old garden tools. He looked thinner, humbled. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a deep, weary sadness in his eyes. He didn't start with excuses or justifications. He just looked at me, his voice rough from disuse. "I'm sorry, Elara," he said. "There's no excuse. He was my father, and I was a coward. I let his fear become my own. I betrayed you. I betrayed our marriage, and I betrayed this place." I listened, letting the words settle between us. Forgiveness wasn't a word I felt. Not yet. It seemed too easy, a balm for a wound that was still too deep. But I looked at his hands, calloused and dirty from actual work for the first time in his life. And I felt something else. A flicker of a possibility. Trust, once it's burned to the ground. "Liam doesn't just grow back," I said, my voice even. "You have to plant new roots. And you have to tend to them every single day, without knowing if they'll ever take hold." I picked up a pair of pruning shears from the bench. The spring pruning starts next week. It's the hardest work of the year. Be at the North Block. 6 a.m. You'll report to Isabel and me. A flicker of disbelief, then a wave of profound, tearful gratitude washed over his face. He simply nodded, unable to speak. It wasn't a reconciliation. It wasn't a promise. It was a chance. A single, fragile seed. The scene shifts. It is now early spring. The snow has melted, leaving the earth dark, damp, and fertile. Elara and Isabel walk the rows of dormant vines, their boots sinking into the soft mud. They move with an easy, familiar rhythm, partners in every sense of the word. Isabel is sketching a new wine label design in a notepad, a fiery, abstract phoenix rising from the soil. Today, the air smells of hope. It smells of thawing earth and the promise of new life. With Isabel's eye for art and my hand in the soil, we are building something new. Not the Laurent legacy, but our own. A legacy of two women who refused to be broken. A legacy of truth. We're even planning a new vintage. We're going to call it Caretaker's Red. The final shot. Elara is alone in the vineyard. The sun is warm on her back. She is kneeling, her hands in the dirt. She gently touches a tiny, green bud, the first sign of life on a vine that has survived the winter. A genuine, peaceful smile touches her lips. She is home. I learned that some things, when they break, can't be put back together the way they were. But you can take the broken pieces and use them to build a stronger foundation. The victory wasn't in watching them fall. The real victory is this moment. The sun on my face. the rich soil under my fingernails, and the quiet, thrilling promise of a new season. It's the feeling of planting new roots. And knowing, finally, that you are in charge of your own harvest. What did you think of Elara's final decision? Was it forgiveness, or something more? Share your thoughts in the comments below. For more stories about quiet strength and powerful comebacks, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching.